Hello everyone, Darkaball Trades here. Now my goal for this channel, the main reason why I investigate all of these bad religious claims, is to help people understand critical thinking and hopefully help people think more critically. So today, I'm responding to a video one of you, of no doubt above average intelligence and looks, fans of mine sent. This one promises to show the impossible. So today's video comes from a channel called the Kees Boer Ministry Channel. I don't know anything about him. Kees seems to be from the Netherlands who moved to the United States, but it's not about him. The video is titled, "This is why atheism is impossible." Well, I'm going to presume he just means the idea that a god does not exist, and not the idea that one does not believe in a god, because I don't want to just respond to someone blatantly asserting Romans 1:19, and since I'm releasing this video, you can rest assured that, if nothing else, there's more to this video than that. So without further ado, let's meet Kees Boer and see what he thinks makes atheism impossible.
Only heaven silent for an answer.
Hi,
Hi, Kees.
how do you know that there's a God?
There isn't, and I know that.
It's actually a very simple question, and the answer is so easy.
Well, I guess literally everyone who has tried to show a god, any god exists, is just doing it wrong. You're delivering this with such confidence. I haven't seen anyone give a valid and sound way to show a god exists, and nor has countless other atheists, especially counter-apologists. But if you think it's easy, let's see.
By doing some deductive reasoning, you can know that there is a God. You can also show it to others. Now, as with most apologetics, most unbelievers will not accept this because their reason for being an unbeliever is not a scientific reason or a logical reason.
Citation needed for this one. Are we really starting with the Christian trope of atheists aren't atheists because of their head, but because of their heart? This looks like a case of a theist pretending to know what's in everyone else's head. It's pretty disgusting, but maybe not. Let's see.
The power of God for salvation is in the gospel, not in human reasoning. But this is a very logical short proof for there being a God.
Alright, it's a very logical short proof. That means we can check it to see if it's valid and sound. Well, that's what I like to see.
At the end, I'll share one more passage that actually proves a theory that Einstein invented, after it had been in the Bible for over 2,500 years.
And that little boy was Albert Einstein. I'm going to skip his intro. I'll leave a link to the video in the description so you all know that I'm not cutting out anything relevant.
So let's assume that we don't know. Or we are agnostic. That's what the word agnostic means, without knowledge. Now let's figure out a basic question. Where did everything come from? Where did the world come from? Where did life come from?
Okay, these are pretty common questions I see when dealing with apologetics. Well, first, agnostic doesn't necessarily mean total ignorance. It means someone that doesn't know if a god exists or not. Basically the idea of withholding certainty when one doesn't have enough evidence. And that's a virtue in science, not a flaw. Now on the origins of everything. We can't see before the Planck time. What we do know is that about 13.8 billion years ago, the universe rapidly expanded from an incredibly hot and dense state. That is the Big Bang. And that's not just some guess. It's backed by observable evidence like the cosmic background radiation and the distribution of galaxies. This could happen if a god existed, so I'm okay with this so far. As for the Earth, about 4.6 billion years ago, our solar system formed from a collapsing cloud of gas and dust, a solar nebula. Gravity pulled it together into a spinning disk. The sun formed at the center, and planets like Earth emerged from the leftovers in a process called accretion. This is literally textbook astronomy. I'll leave a link to a space.com article for more on this. Though again, a god could exist, and this could still be the case. No problems yet. And as for life, well, we aren't entirely sure exactly how it started, but we're working on it. But literally all signs point to a natural origin. The Miller-Urey experiment and others show how simple compounds can spontaneously form more complex organic molecules under the right conditions. Here's a link, which I'll also put in the description, for a relatively simple explanation from the University of California, Berkeley. So while we may not have every answer yet, but we don't know yet is a world apart from we have no clue at all. And it certainly doesn't justify jumping to magic. But in fairness, a god could still exist even if all of this is true. But a god isn't necessarily needed for any of this.
I'm going to narrow it down to two choices, something or nothing. Can you think of another choice between those two?
Well, sure. How about this? Maybe everything always existed in some form. This is not just another choice, it's actually a more consistent one than you are defending. After all, if you believe your God is eternal and uncreated, then you've already accepted the idea that something can exist without having been made. So why not apply the same logic to matter, energy, or the quantum vacuum, all things we know exist? Why add another thing we, and I'm being charitable here, don't know if it exists or not? Isn't this violating Occam's razor? Physics tells us that energy can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. So it's entirely reasonable to consider that the universe, more specifically the stuff that gave rise to it, has always existed in some form, and we don't need to insert a conscious creator into the mix just to feel better about it. Besides, when people talk about nothing, they usually mean something far less clear-cut than the total absence of everything. Real nothing, with no laws, no potential, no space, no time, is a philosophical abstraction and not a scientific default state. So yes, there are technically more than two choices, and no, Magic Man did it doesn't win by default just because somebody said the word nothing with a dramatic pause.
Realize that if you say energy, that would be something. It would not be nothing.
You almost got me. But okay, I'm willing to run with this. Let's just say your wording was a bit oversimplistic. Let's say my answer is actually, it came from something because every configuration wasn't the exact same as it is now.
It couldn't be nothing, because that would absolutely make no sense whatsoever.
Saying nothing makes no sense isn't an explanation, it's just a dismissal, hand-waving the idea away. The problem is, nothing isn't a clearly defined concept. Are we talking about the absence of matter, energy, space, time, laws of physics? Because depending on how you define it, what you're calling nothing might already have structure or potential. Something tells me you haven't read any Lawrence Krauss. And if nothing truly has no properties, then it also has no property that prevents something from arising. So until we define it rigorously and observe its behavior, you can't make sweeping claims about what it can or can't do. And it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, because as Neil deGrasse Tyson says,
and so the universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. It's the observations that matter, even if they conflict what feels right to you.
There had to be something for all eternity past. You can try this with a bank that you don't have an account with. Try withdrawing money. If it works, please teach me. So we can deduce from this that there always was at least something for all eternity.
This bank analogy seems a bit strange. You can absolutely withdraw money from a bank if you don't have an account with it. I don't think you want me to teach anyone the methods, though. It seems like you're agreeing in part with my initial statement, and that's good. And while I know where this is going because I've seen this kind of video countless times now over the 4 years or so of having a channel, starting with a point of agreement is good. But I'm warning you right now, if you keep going on this path, I'm going to ask you what your God made the universe out of that was there before. But go on, here's some more rope for you.
What it is, we haven't figured out yet.
Well, kudos to you for being honest and saying that we don't know what happened before the Planck time. I am sure that is what you mean here.
So then the next question. There's something which was eternal. Was it something personal or impersonal?
Hold on, why is that the next question? Even if I grant that something eternal exists, and that's already doing you a favor, why should its personality be the immediate follow-up? Personal often means having some kind of mind or will. The universe doesn't scream personality, it screams indifference. Vast stretches of space, billions of years of silence, entropy dragging everything towards heat death. If that's personal, then this deity is ice cold. And besides, even if something did create the universe, why does it have to be a who instead of a what? A deist might say it was a God who doesn't care. I might say it was a natural process we just don't understand yet. Or hey, maybe it was my magical primordial space crystal. How do you determine it wasn't my magical primordial space crystal? You're just assuming that personal is somehow the default, but you haven't given us a single reason why this should be the case. So yeah, I'd love to hear how you plan to determine if this unknown eternal thing was a conscious agent or not.
Something personal would be a being that has personality. Something impersonal would be like a rock, energy, gas, or some liquid. Anyway, now the question again is, are there any other options? I myself can't think of any other options.
Either something is personal or it is not. I can't argue with you on that one. Though, as I mentioned before, it could be personal and just not care like the deists think.
Could we all have come from something impersonal? That would not make any sense either. First question would be, how did personality develop? I mean, we don't see a rock getting angry. Our furniture doesn't fall in love with some other piece of furniture. Have you ever seen an anxious box? Even when you are about to throw it in the trash?
It looks like you're confusing impersonal with unemotional. Of course, a rock doesn't get angry, but that doesn't mean personality couldn't emerge from impersonal conditions. There are plenty of chemical and physical reactions that happen with inanimate objects. Let's take an example. Potassium doesn't feel anything, but toss it into water and you get a violent reaction. No soul is required there. Complex systems produce complex outcomes. Take atoms, impersonal little particles. Arrange them into carbon-based molecules, and suddenly you've got RNA. Stack enough of those reactions together over billions of years, and eventually you get things like fear, love, and existential dread. Lucky us. We already observe emergent properties from non-sentient processes. Consciousness, as far as we know, is just what happens when enough neurons start networking. Again, that's not magic, it's chemistry, biology, and physics. And speaking of magic, if I say it was caused by a magical, impersonal, emotionless space crystal, how exactly is that less plausible than your version of a universe made by an invisible person with very strong feelings?
Second of all, the second law of thermodynamics teaches that everything will go towards disorder. Energy will go towards less useful type of energy. Turn the light on and part of the energy will go towards heat.
Sure, the second law of thermodynamics does describe entropy. That is the tendency of energy in an isolated system to move towards a less ordered, less useful state. But that's the key word here, isolated. The Earth, for example, is not an isolated system. It gets a constant influx of energy from the sun. That's how plants grow, weather systems form, and yes, how complex life arises. So citing entropy as some kind of deal breaker for life developing naturally is just misusing the science. If you're curious, Dr. Carroll, who is an actual physicist, has a great lecture on this. I'll leave a link to a clip in the description. Spoiler, entropy isn't a mic drop for creationists. But even if we grant this, are you applying it to your God too? Is Yahweh subject to entropy? Does an all-powerful being suffer energy loss over time? Or is that conveniently excluded? If your answer is, well, God doesn't have to follow the rules of physics, then congratulations. That's special pleading. One of those pesky problems with your logic, not science.
It really goes against all logic that's to say that something complex, as for instance, the human body, could develop without a designer.
That's the argument from ignorance dressed up as complexity. I don't know how something complex like the human body could evolve, so it must have been designed. But nature doesn't need blueprints to produce complexity. Snowflakes and hurricanes are incredibly complex, and we have no reason to say anyone designed them. Evolution, given time, pressure, and variation, explains complexity. It's not that complexity can't arise naturally, it's that you're refusing to accept that it can.
When you see a beautiful painting, you know that there was a painter who made it. A book is written by an author and a building is designed by an architect. So creation is made by creator.
Ah, yes, the good old watchmaker analogy. A classic, and still just as flawed. We know paintings have painters, and books have authors, and buildings have architects because we've seen those things being made by humans repeatedly, observably, empirically. We don't conclude that things are designed because they're complex or beautiful. We know they're designed because we witness the designers at work. So if we see something, how do we tell if something is designed or not? It isn't by its complexity, it's by comparing it to things we know are not designed. So now here's the trick that you think people will just let slide because of colloquial use. But remember, this is about logic, and as such, you need to choose your words carefully. You said creation has a creator, but by calling the universe creation, you're already assuming your conclusion. That's begging the question, where you assume your conclusion in one of your premises. In this case, you don't get to smuggle in a creator just by labeling the universe as its product. That's not an argument, that's marketing.
Because the only logical conclusion that we can come to is that everything came from something eternal that has personality.
Wait, what? How did we suddenly jump to personality? Even if I generously granted you an eternal something behind the universe, which, by the way, your own appeal to the second law of thermodynamics would seem to contradict, you haven't gotten anywhere close to demonstrating that this something has a personality. You haven't ruled out an unthinking cause. You haven't ruled out natural processes. You haven't even ruled out my magical primordial space crystal, and I assure you, it's very impersonal. You just said, creation is made by a creator, and then gave that creator character traits without any justification. Again, we're not using logic here, you're storytelling. And even if I grant a creator that has some kind of will or intent, you're still nowhere near your specific God claim. You need to show that it is not one of the thousands of other gods that humans have believed in. Why Yahweh and not Odin, Ra, or even a committee of cosmic jellyfish? So far, we've had a leap, a dodge, and a whole lot of hand-waving, but not a shred of evidence.
At the end, I promise you one passage which really shows how God made everything. It's Jeremiah 10, verse 12. He hath made the earth by his power. He established the world by his wisdom and has stretched out the heavens by his discretion. Notice, God took his power and created the earth. He took energy and made matter. It's almost like E equals mc squared.
Oh wow, we're really doing this. We're retrofitting Einstein's equation into a 2,600-year-old Bronze Age text. Okay, let's break this down. First, yes, the universe is made up of energy and matter. And yes, E equals mc squared does describe the relationship between them. But saying that power in Jeremiah is equivalent to energy in the physics sense, and that this somehow anticipates modern physics, is just linguistic sleight of hand. You don't get to claim scientific pre-science because the Bible has used poetic terms like power and then stretched them to mean mass-energy equivalents. This is like reading Let There Be Light and concluding the Bible discovered quantum electrodynamics. Jeremiah wasn't talking about subatomic particles, and he definitely wasn't working with special relativity. And let's be honest, if ancient texts had actually predicted E equals mc squared, they would have written E equals mc squared and not vague metaphors you can only twist into something scientific after the fact. This is what happens when you start with a conclusion and reverse engineer vague verses to match it. It's not science, it's not exegesis, it's apologetic pareidolia, seeing what you want to see in the clouds. And that's the end of his video. So what are his points here? What is the this that Keyes thinks is why atheism is impossible? Assume that we are agnostic. Where did everything come from? Everything either came from something or nothing. Everything can't have come from nothing because that doesn't make sense. There had to be something that existed eternally into the past. The thing that created everything is either personal or impersonal. Everything can't have come from something impersonal because that doesn't make sense. The second law of thermodynamics teaches that everything will go towards disorder. The human body couldn't have developed without a designer because that doesn't make sense. The watchmaker argument. The only logical conclusion is that everything came from something eternal that has personality. E equals mc squared is, effectively, in the Bible. But what do you think about his thoughts? Do you think he gave a good explanation as to why atheism is impossible? Or do you think that there was maybe a hole or two in his logic? Let me know in the comments below. Overall, I give Keyes Boer a 9 facepalmy Mr. Jesuses out of 10. Keyes presents himself as offering a logical explanation, but repeatedly uses loaded language, false dichotomies, and unjustified assumptions like it couldn't be nothing and it has to be personal, without even trying to back them up. He frames premises to guarantee his conclusion instead of allowing for open inquiry or multiple possible outcomes, which is simply rhetorical sleight of hand. His either something or nothing setup, treating the second law of thermodynamics like a theological axiom, and claiming the it's almost like E equals mc squared in Jeremiah are all red flags. He doesn't clarify his definitions, nor does he sincerely engage with what atheism actually entails or what atheists actually believe. He just sees what he wants to see wherever he can. He lacks even a rudimentary engagement with academic standards. Keyes makes scientific and philosophical claims without citing sources, clarifying terms, or acknowledging counterarguments. The misuse of the second law of thermodynamics, for instance, suggests a superficial or distorted understanding of science used only to support a presupposed religious framework. Equating God's power with energy and connecting that to Einstein's equation is a textbook example of pseudoscientific language manipulation and not scholarship. There is no nuance, no citations, no peer-reviewed content. Even by ministry standards, this is very light on substance. And finally, Keyes doesn't actually demonstrate that atheism is impossible. He builds a case for theism from personal and oversimplified reasoning, but never engages with actual atheist arguments or definitions. Instead of tackling why someone couldn't reasonably be an atheist, he assumes atheism is wrong because he thinks theism is obviously true, which is circular. He also skips over important intermediate steps, like explaining why something personal and eternal necessarily leads to his God, or how we know creation occurred at all. His title promises a takedown of atheism, but the video is more of a basics apologetics 101. Nothing new, no novel arguments, no real engagement. So while this might pass as persuasive for viewers already inclined to believe with Keyes, all it is apologetics by assertion, using oversimplifications, poor analogies, and circular logic to land where he wanted to go all along. He doesn't earn his conclusions, and the audience is expected to simply accept definitions and leaps without skepticism. For someone who's traveled the world speaking on this, you'd expect more than low-resolution theology disguised as reason. It's not the worst thing out there, but as a case for why atheism is impossible, it fails to even scratch the surface of what atheism is or why someone might hold it. That's it for this one. So now, what do you think? Do you think I nailed down the logic on this one? Or do you think Keyes galaxy-brained me in a way I just missed? Let me know in the comments below. So if you appreciated the takedown of the proposed impossibility, show that by hitting that like button. Though you too can have a relationship with energy by hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already to work with the YouTubes to get more of this content delivered directly to you. Though speaking of a relationship, I need to give the biggest heart emoji to my biggest fans, my patrons, especially Calamimus Anima and Sora, who are the committee of cosmic jellyfish that created the universe that is my channel. If you would like to be part of the energy and therefore something that created the universe, you can join them for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. But really, thank you all for spending time with me today. This one was a little easier than some of the more recent videos I've done, but that also meant I got to dive further into ideas I really enjoy. Thank you for liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing a video, giving me ideas, everything that helps support this channel. Maybe I'll make a breakdown of how long it takes for me to do every step in making a video, because unlike preachers, this isn't just me sitting in front of a camera and just talking off the top of my head. I put in real time to make sure that what I'm telling you is correct, and making my arguments as tight as I do takes a lot of work, but not as much as trying to understand the arguments being made and how to make them as strong as I can so I can take down the best possible versions. It is a ton, but very fulfilling work, and all of you make it all worth it. So thank you all so much. And as always, keep learning.
So that's why my